good Monday afternoon, or might even be coming on evening for some people. I am on the West Coast, so it is afternoon right here. And this is something that I've not done too much. I just spontaneously decide that it's time to do a show. And I think we're going to be doing more of that. I've got a couple of really great guest hosts that are going to be helping me out in future. But you hopefully have been tuning in to the discussion with Dr. Judy Wood and some of the other folks that I've had on live. And now I am going to be just putting it out there. And of course it goes live, but then we will be doing an archive as well, so people can tune in and check it out. I just did the radio show today, so I was just looking around and seeing what was happening in the world. Noticed that George Webb had finally gotten on to the... Here, I'm just actually going to take the Brave... So I was just explaining how my cat was walking all over my audio equipment, and at that very moment the audio went. So the best laid plans, so sorry about that. Anyway, I wasn't saying anything much more than my cat is walking over the audio equipment, and it's probably going to mean that my audio equipment is going to cut out. And sure enough, it did. So thanks, you guys. I really appreciate your patience. I was saying that I just finished doing my radio show and was trolling around looking at the internet and seeing what was out there, what's the news. And I found out that George Webb actually finally got on to the news. It's the, what is it? The, can't remember the name of, it's the OAN. What is that? One America News Network. So what I wanted to do is just show you a little bit of that in case you hadn't seen it. Some of you might actually tune into the One America News Network. Just going to give you a little flavor of, for those of you that have been following George Webb, of what's going on in his world, because I think it's really important. Let's take a listen.
Meanwhile, the Podesta Group and others are facing new legal battles after a former Bernie Sanders supporter files suit. Once again, One America's Emerald Robinson has more from Washington.
The One brothers will return to court this upcoming week on charges of bank and mortgage fraud. However, one man says he's picking up where the FBI and federal government is leaving off with the charges in the case of the former Democratic IT employees with a civil action lawsuit. And he's going after others connected to the DNC in a total of 3 lawsuits where he says it's all about the discovery process.
Discovery. We get to go to discovery. That's the case, is really to discover documents all along the way.
George Webb is the man behind the lawsuits, and he says it's all about revealing information that has been withheld. He says he can do this through the discovery process part of a civil case.
Now, I'm actually turning down the audio because I know that YouTube has some rules, and I get it. You know, there's actually some rules about not using other people's videos on my videos. What I'm trying to do is to encourage people to go over to the One America Network, One America News Network. Sorry, I'm sure that you know it, and you can actually listen to this. I will put a link into the description after I finish with this. This is just a short kind of update because I thought it was quite interesting to see him actually get onto TV, and you can really tell that things are breaking wide open when you start seeing George Webb on TV, even though it is not mainstream, which is great actually. I think that it's wonderful that it's not mainstream media because it probably wouldn't even be shown and people wouldn't believe it even if they had heard. Thanks guys for letting me know that it's working. I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but I had a little problem with my cat walking over my instruments, my audio, and so this is the problem with having a studio that has a cat in it. The cat is on a ladder right now, so we don't have to worry about it too much. Anyway, you can see this video. I've cut down the audio because I don't want to get into problems with YouTube, heaven forbid. It's hard enough to show videos as it is, but really my only point is to introduce you to the fact that this is gaining traction if you've been watching George Webb and if you've been in any way following this case, which I would assume that all of my clever listeners have been doing. And so if you want to check that out for yourself, I highly recommend it. I love how they don't even have his name in the title. It says man files civil suit against Iwan's Podesta Group and others. And so you can take a look at that. Oh, did you hear that? That was my cat again. I do apologize. I'm not sure what one can do about their cat. Well, I suppose they could be in a studio like this woman here. I'm sure that they have cat wranglers. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the fact that I saw another really great thing today. This is a little article that I saw in American Greatness. Now, this is not something that I'm familiar with. I think I got a link in Hedge. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments as well. I went to Zero Hedge, and I was taking a look there, and somehow I ended up on this particular page with this particular article, and it is called In Defense of Masculinity, written yesterday would have been the 26th, and Ned Ryun, is that how you'd pronounce it? R-Y-U-N. So again, I really encourage you to go over. I just wanted to share a couple of things that I'd found today because I don't have a guest, but I thought that it was really timely, some of this information, because I'm getting a little bit frustrated. I don't know about you, but if you heard Dr. Judy and I talking on the weekend, you would have known that we are both a little bit frustrated about what's happening with what seems to be a pretty planned rollout of the sex scandals just in time for certain elections. And I'm not even sure what's going on in terms of who's orchestrating it, who's who, but I'm not a right-left thinker because, well, maybe in my brain, but in terms of politics, because I think a lot of this is orchestrated overall. And sometimes I wonder if we aren't just in a little bit of a play and we're just the audience watching. So I try not to get too wrapped up in whether it's right or left. But this is interesting. The last month has been a whirlwind of allegations and accusations of sexual assault from the heights of Hollywood to the halls of Congress, big media, and beyond. Men from all walks of life, political beliefs, and social classes are losing their marriages and livelihoods, not to mention their reputations due of the assaults, but I think they meant due to the assaults and unwanted attention they have perpetrated on women and in some cases men in their lives. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can be thankful about that, but this is an interesting sentence, though. The irony is that in many of these situations, the ones being exposed, pun intended, reside within the warm cocoon of the liberal cultural elite. Many of these people have spent a lifetime and a great deal of effort and money sneering at and debasing the culture of practiced faith, respect for women, the institutions of traditional marriage and family, all the while portraying men of that debased lifestyle they disparaged as enlightened peasants and troglodytes. Troglodytes. I knew I'd have a hard time with that word. It just means cavemen, even if I can't pronounce it. People who are Neanderthal in their thinking. And so this is really getting to the heart of it. Now it appears the men who mounted these assaults, both literally and figuratively, it's really going for the puns and double entendre, are nothing but patriarchal, misogynistic perverts. But unfortunately, we're seeing commenters, including women such as Michelle Obama, who actively enabled the likes of Harvey Weinstein, Charlie Rose, Al Franken, Bill Clinton, and John Conyers, pinning the problem on toxic masculinity, as if all men are responsible for and capable of abusing the people around them in this way. Now, I really encourage you again to go and take a look at this. It's on amgreatness.com, and it'll be easy to find in defense of masculinity. I actually was able to find it by just doing a search on the search engine in defense of. There's actually quite a few articles by that name, but this one is quite good, and I think it really goes to the point of what Dr. Judy and I were saying, is that there's just a whole plethora of information that is coming forward, and to hear it, you would think that there's just a huge new group of people that are preying on one another. What's really been happening is that over the past 20 years, 30 years, a lot of this stuff has just been kept at bay. But really what we're looking at is people like Bill Clinton, who were completely immunized from all of this publicity, shall we say. And so that's really the issue, is not so much that it's just all of a sudden happening, but the fact that it's been happening for a long time, and that now we're just in a climate where things are coming to a head. So I was talking to Radiate today, a friend of mine. We're going to be co-hosting a show together. And we were discussing some of these ideas about the right-left paradigm and how sometimes we can get really caught up with all of that rhetoric, when in fact, really what it is there are those that will enable, those that will cover up. They will say one thing and they'll do something behind closed doors, and sometimes often in the light of day, as in the case of Bill Clinton. If you've taken a look at any of the videos, of course there's obviously going to be a slant. But when I see police officers and various people piping up and saying they were there protecting Bill Clinton in the 80s and often as early as in the 70s. Now, I'm not picking on Bill Clinton. I'm just saying that this is a climate that was created in the early era of Bill Clinton's, what would we call it, his reign, his regime. And, of course, he had the charm to be able to, well, I guess, get these women into his office in the first place. I don't know. I'm not going to go too much into the Bill Clinton thing. I'm just saying that that was an era where ostensibly women were to be believed, and yet they were being ostracized. They were also being maligned, as we all know. And I don't really need to go into that too much, but it's really cool for me to see that there are people that are now speaking up in defense of masculinity, femininity, whatever you want to call it. But the fact that we actually are, we're being very unfair to the genders in both senses by either saying that all women who find themselves in a situation where they are prone to be sexually abused are they should know better, which was of course what we had before, to where it turned to the other way. All of a sudden the Harvey Weinstein thing came out, and everybody and their dog was out there talking about how, oh yes, it's all been corrupt and we've known about it. Now, I have a problem with this. When you have a person like, who was it, Gwyneth Paltrow, I think it was, who came out and said that she had been abused when she was 20 years old, and she was a young actress at the time. Well, you don't wait 20 years to talk about it. If you were then a young actress, and I can understand it, but what about the young actresses now who are still being subjected to people like Harvey Weinstein? What about the last 20 years made it so that you couldn't speak out? For one thing, you are Blythe Danner's daughter, and you already had a fairly elite status in Hollywood as it was. And if you couldn't speak out for other people, who could? Now, I don't want to get into this whole thing either of this person was right, this person was wrong. I just want to say that a lot of this just seems to be very insincere, in my opinion. The most sincere person I can see out of Hollywood is Suzanne Sarandon, who gets a lot of hassle for her outspoken beliefs and her way of putting forth her ideas. She's just come out and said that she's really glad that Hillary didn't become president because she thinks we would have been in the middle of World War III, or something to that effect. So I think what's happening out of all of this craziness, the screaming at the sky, people that really don't know what else to say, they just feel a certain way. They don't seem to have any evidence to be able to support their feelings or beliefs, is that we are finally coming around to where we can have some sort of a discussion, and maybe it will be a heated discussion, but it's a discussion that starts to become real and starts to become authentic. And I think this article, to me, people may disagree, but it actually feels to me that there are a lot of people who are just wanting to have things become somewhat normalized. Forget about the pronouns, forget about this group, that group, the other group. Let's just, get rid of some of the rhetoric and start talking about things like in this, let me just go back to this for you. It is talking about, this fellow is talking about lost virtues, and which is something that I don't hear a lot about. But I feel this way myself, especially as the parent of, I've got 6 kids, 4 of which are boys, and they're all grown up. But I do feel that this is a very timely article. In search of lost values, when you consider that the quote, sex positive, unquote, culture of the 1960s and 70s turned sex from a function of emotional love and committed relationships working toward the goal of procreation into a casual transactional exchange at the whims of the participants, it's not hard to understand how the likes of Clinton, Spacey, and Conyers evolved. The former put the emphasis on the other, the latter on the self. 5 decades of Hollywood and the media assaulting the institutions of marriage and the family, culturally objectifying women in print and film, and normalizing abhorrent behavior of lifestyle can do that. Okay, again, I won't go into reading the whole thing again, but I do think it's worth a watch. And I'm not expecting people to necessarily agree or disagree. It's about just having the conversation. because I know that when I was having kids and trying to have a career as well, mostly out of necessity because of the need to, make some money. I think that in a lot of ways we've been put into a very difficult situation as the slaves of those who are trying to keep us under their thumbs, where we are so busy making a living that they're really, all of these people that are talking about choice and all the rest of it, they live rather in a bubble, a lot of them, because sometimes there are no choices. And that includes people who happen to get pregnant, even if they're in a marriage, and it may not be something that they had planned to do, but they have the integrity to actually consider the life of their child as much as the life that they're leading, or that they are, the lifestyle that they're pursuing, or whatever you want to call it. So this whole idea of lifestyle, I think, has taken precedence over the fact that we need to offer life. And so again, one could get into the whole pro-life argument. That's really not the issue. I think it's just a general sense of respect that has been missing, and that seems to have been fomented and turned into, this huge argument. You'll notice that it's all an argument. There's never sort of a discourse, a discussion about different people's opinions. It turns into this kind of ad hominem mudslinging contest. So this is quite a brave act in a lot of ways, to write something that is really just putting it all out there and saying, here's the reality of the situation. And I like this too. We all make choices every day to objectify or not, to harm or not, to respect or not. Whatever happened to self-control and dignity? While we're at it, whatever happened to being faithful and being true to a promise? Whatever happened to being virtuous? The Latin root of virtue is vir, meaning man. Definitionally, to be a man means to partake in virtue. Manly does not mean showing off with Gaston-like bravado, boasting about one's power over others, but instead possessing strength of will, honor, and compassion. I mean, just such a well-stated discussion about the meaning of the word. And by the same token, the fact that we need to respect men in that. I think this whole idea that men have a difficult time figuring out what their role is, what they can do, what they, if I touch, if I say hello, if I, what can I do, what can't I do, is all part of the dehumanizing. And I just don't want to buy into it. So I think that this article kind of puts forward some of the ideals that we are missing, and that Hollywood used to actually, as it says, Hollywood used to embrace itself with Jimmy Stewart, Gary Cooper, John Wayne. Feel what you can. I didn't really like some of the ways that they depicted women and men, but there's got to be some sort of sense that we're allowed to be fully human, whatever that is. And if that means that we are of one gender or another, we do have a scientific basis for believing that we are male or female, regardless of what happens in terms of our feelings or our understanding of who we are individually. We do have a rather scientific basis for believing that there are two genders. And but you know what? I did talk to Dr. Joyce Young at one point, and I found it really interesting because I used to have a very difficult time with the idea that there seemed to be a lot of hormonal imbalances happening with both men and women. And of course we're going to have that. We've got birth control being peed out into the sewers and going out into our water system and coming back into our water system. We've got her point, Dr. Joyce Young, if you haven't heard of her, she was really making the point that even in our packaging, when we are eating out of plastic containers, there's hormones there. And I think all of this is part of the agenda, that there is sort of a shift that's taking place even with babies that are being born. She was saying that in some, well, she said it's actually supposed to be a secret, but it's not a very well kept secret, that because some of the children have been allocated at birth as being male or female, because they tend to have so many hormonal problems even at birth, that it's difficult to tell whether they're fully boys or girls, even though they started off with a chromosomal and biological predisposition to being male or female. They have to allocate gender at birth, which really shocked me. Now, I don't know how true that is, but it did come from a doctor, and that she was saying that some even kindergarten teachers were saying that children may appear to be one sex or the other, but that we need to be open to the idea that they would identify as the opposite gender. Now, this makes for some really crazy, toxic, not only relationships, but discussions and thoughts about life in general. So I don't need to come down on either side, one or the other. I don't think it's just a matter of deciding that you're gay or whatever it is. It's about, we have a culture that is basically full of very toxic, real toxic concoctions, whether it's in our water, whether it's in our plastics, whether it's in our schools, whether it's in our politics. And I think that it's really important for us to just go back to the basics and start taking a look, having compassion, having an eye to looking at what the real problem is and what the underlying problem is. And when I see the situation with George Webb, it does tie in, because there are people like George that will step forward and do things that are incredibly brave and incredibly proactive, and where the rest of the people may be saying, oh yeah, well, what can you do? You know, things are like this are going to happen. There are others who will step forward and they will write articles like this, or they will they will put their money where their mouth is and take people to task, instead of just sitting back and lamenting what's happening. And I think it's cool. We're actually in a culture right now where that's starting to happen. We were talking on the weekend, Dr. Judy Wood and I were talking about the situation with Lindsay Shepherd, who some people may or may not know about, but take a look, check out Lindsay Shepherd, who is a TA. She was at Waterloo. She lives in Waterloo. She was at Wilfrid Laurier University, and was they were trying to re-educate her about her understanding of pronoun usage, and the fact that she brought a video by Dr. Jordan Peterson, which actually appeared on a show called Access, which was on mainstream TV. She had the unmitigated gall to show that as part of her English course. She was trying to talk about pronouns and usages and how they're changing. I believe that was the gist of it. Got called up on the carpet, recorded the conversation, and now has rained down a whole pile of bad stuff on those that were trying to re-educate her. So I do see a glimmer of hope when it comes to things like this. So I just wanted to check in with you and see that everything was working properly, because I do plan to have some more guests on, and I will know next time to keep my cat off of my equipment, even though he's incredibly cute, I have to say. You can see that I'm in my my studio here. Believe it or not, a lot of that is just equipment up there, and I decided that I would not even bother with the background or anything else. I'll give you a tour someday of the studio, but right now I'm just gonna go back to what I was doing. I'm going to be getting ready for another broadcast, and I really thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you will subscribe, and that I will be able to get more and more people on the show that will be of interest. And I'm also having discussions. I can't really do it too much when I'm here by myself, but I want to do more in the way of having people talk to the guests. And particularly, as I said, Dr. Judy, tune in. It's usually around 1 or 1:30 on a Saturday. That's Pacific time. So if you're in the East, just add 3 hours. And trying to do more and more of that kind of thing. I'm going to be doing a show with Radiate, as I said. And he's been helping me with Buck the truck, by the way. I have an amazing truck. I have a picture somewhere, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it for you. Not that you really need it, but Buck's a great 1989 F-250. And for those that are real truck buffs in the group, it's a Windsor 351, which is it's a pretty cool engine, and not that easy to find. As I said, it's a 4x4, and I was having a little bit of a problem with it today, so I was able to actually use one of my live streams to be able to go and show the problem to Radiate, who used to be a mechanic. He used to work a lot with, I think it was 69 Cougars, and so I just think that it's going to be of interest, because he's not really going to be doing car talk. He's going to be talking to me about some of the situations in the world, and I think you'll be very interested. The other thing about Radiate is that he is he's very knowledgeable about sodium chlorite. And if you haven't seen my video with Dr. Andreas Kalker, I highly recommend it. Please take a look. I believe you can find it on my playlist by just searching Dr. Kalcker, Dr. Andreas Kalker. And now he's not a medical doctor, he's a researcher, and he is in Spain right now. But he's been doing amazing work with sodium chlorite. And that's not chloride, it's chlorite. And so it's sodium chlorite. Chlorine dioxide is another way that you can express it. And Ray has actually done a lot of work with some of the people in the field that have been doing studies, and it's having amazing results with everything from cancer to, believe it or not, autism. I don't know if any of you have heard of Carrie Rivera, but I also have an interview with her that you can take a look at on my channel, or you can take a look at any other of the channels that have uploaded. My goal is to bring you people who are character driven, people who are making a difference in the world, people who are doing things that are not necessarily mainstream, but they're doing it because they care about their fellow human beings. And that's why I showed George Webb. That's why I show an article like this one in American Greatness, because I think that it's important to really focus on the people who really truly are making a difference in the world, and inspiring those of you out there who can make a difference in your world as well. And I'm sure you all are making a difference. I'm not saying that you're not. But sometimes we just need the tools. For instance, Charles Ortel came onto my radio show and helped to explain the Clinton connection. I've had Stephen Shellen on. He's a targeted individual. Julia Davis, who was a border guard, whose life was completely changed when she made the unexpected, had the unexpected results when she made a phone call to the FBI when there were people trying to cross the border in 2004. So there's a variety of people, especially the people I've had on my radio show, that I've sort of translated to the YouTube platform, because I've been doing a radio show for a number of years, and so many of my interviews are not YouTube interesting. They're not interesting to people on YouTube because they're audio, but I may be putting some of those up as well. But I am trying to get those people back on and have them talk to you, and then to have an interchange in these live discussions. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you'll ask other people to tune in, especially on Saturdays with Dr. Judy Wood. If you don't know about her book, Where Did the Towers Go?, I highly recommend that you get a copy of that. And if you can't get a copy of it, she wants people to read it beginning to end, and she does have it in written form so that you can do that. And a lot of the pictures are from the NIST inquiry. And so I would highly recommend that you take a look at those. But you can also go to her website, drjudywood.com, or you can also go to wheredidthetowers.go.com. And Dr. Judy Wood is sort of a repository that she's had for many, many years. So you can find out a lot there. And stay tuned, because we're going to be having Radiate and a number of really interesting guests coming on. So thank you again for tuning in, and I'm going to say goodbye. This is Joni, and I really appreciate you tuning in today. And thanks for tolerating my cat. I really appreciate that too. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.